Well, it's been another frustrating weekend when it comes to the EFL Championship for me, but the show must go on as we return for match week 3 predictions here at the Honest Football Podcast. The 24-25 season is 2 weekends in, and there have been plenty of surprises and plenty of goals so far in this EFL season. We're going to look ahead to all 12 matches this weekend, give our thoughts and our score predictions for each of the matches, and as always, I'll encourage you to get involved in your numbers as always down in the comments. Give me your predictions for these weekend's fixtures, and if you do beat or match my overall score, which you'll all be doing at the rate I'm going at the minute, and you will get a shout out in the next recap when we look ahead to match week 4 in a week's time. But for now, before we go and look ahead to the third weekend, we need to have a quick recap of the second one, because despite the fact I'm flying and up near the top in the Fantasy EFL League, I have had a disastrous start to the predictions this season. With 5 minutes to go at the weekend, I was second out of all of the commenters, about 40 of you overall. I was second in the predictions table. Then what happened? Well, Blackburn scored late at Norwich, QPR scored late at Sheffield United. It gave loads of you perfect scores and took away both of mine, which means I finished match week 2 on 4 points rather than the 10 I was heading for a few minutes earlier. And that means I am behind nearly everyone. But again, generally speaking, a very low scoring match day. Let's have a look at how you guys all got on. 4 points level with me: Brian, Gordon, Ojo, Jimmo, Teo, Jake, Daniel and David B, who was last week's winner. One ahead of us on 5 was John, Chris and Etienne. On 6, we had Tony and Paul, but Paul did get a perfect score for the Sheffield United QPR draw, one of many who overtook me with that. BPK was on 7, as was Aksha, who got the perfect score, the Championship's favourite scoreline at Plymouth versus Hull. On 8, 4 of you in total, 2 of you with the perfect score for Norwich v Blackburn, that was Mello and Peter. 2 of you for Plymouth versus Hull, Darren and Simon. And then on 9 points, Swifty, 2 perfect scores for Coventry's late winner and Norwich v Blackburn. 10 points though, we've got our first double figures of the season. In joint second place, Timothy Ridge and Bobby Jimmy. Both of you got 2 perfect scores. Both of you got Plymouth v Hull. Timothy also got Sheffield United v QPR. Bobby also got Norwich versus Blackburn. And in top of the tree, again with Norwich v Blackburn and Plymouth versus Hull, is regular player Mitchell, who got 12 points overall. An incredible effort on match week 2 in another weekend full of surprises where a number of us failed to predict several outcomes. But it's on to match week 3 and hopefully we're going to start to see a bit of consistency from some of the big boys soon. Let's start on Friday night with the game we're going to be here watching live on the channel. You can come and join me on Friday night for a football chat, a preview of the weekend. And while I'm watching Sheffield Wednesday versus Leeds United, a Yorkshire derby between two sides that had, well, drew blanks at the weekend. Leeds still having a tough August, having lost Somerville, having lost in the Carabao Cup, and now with speculation over Rutte, who it looks like may be going as well. It's a very difficult start to the season for them, and they do normally start slow. Daniel Farker sides generally do. But it's the same problem as last year, isn't it? That transfer speculation seems to be holding them back, and it seems to be causing problems within the club. In the end, it was a decent point at West Brom. I think a clean sheet and a draw is a very decent result. And I think after the 3-3 against Portsmouth, it does continue an unbeaten start, albeit not a convincing one. For Sheffield Wednesday, it's the story of 4-0s, isn't it? A good 4-0 win at home to Plymouth on the opening day. But we did say it, didn't we? The weakest defence in the league they came up against. And it kind of proved that way against Sunderland, where I don't know what happened the first half. They just refused to defend set pieces. The first and third goals were ridiculous. They offered so much space up. They kept giving the ball away in their own half. Couldn't handle the Sunderland press, which generally Sheffield Wednesday have been quite good at under Danny Roll. It was just an awful day from start to finish. And in truth, while it was a few gifts in the first half for Sunderland, the scoreline didn't flatter them in the end, which is a worry for Sheffield Wednesday. So looking to this one, we are going to be seeing Wednesday relying on their home form again. For Leeds, it's about finding goals. They did so against Portsmouth, but still missed a few sitters. Are they going to be able to do it this week? I'm going to go for Leeds to kick into gear by 3-1. But again, depends a lot on what happens during the week. I'm having to record this on Monday, so it may well be out of date by the time we get to it. Once you've come and joined me here on Friday night for that though, we can all relax and look ahead to the weekend action, starting with the now new normal 3 weekend early kickoffs, We start with Bristol City versus Coventry City on Saturday. A thrilling win for Bristol City and a pretty thrilling one for Coventry. Late goals the star of the show for both of them, as Bristol City's new returning boy Scott Twine scores the late winner to make it 4-3 against Millwall. A very good first half performance, 2-0 up, very comfortable. But it's the Bristol City problem, holding on to leads, throwing away goals. They're just so poor at it, and it's the inconsistency that gets you. In the end, it might prove to be a benefit getting through a game like that and winning it. But conceding from a leading position, it is a Bristol City trait. I hate to say that. But in the end, it's 3 points, which is what really matters. For Coventry, much the same. They were actually by far the better side against Oxford. But tactically, on the break, they looked a little bit susceptible. They didn't take all of their chances. It could have been a more comfortable night. But Haji Wright was to the rescue just a day after I took him out of my fantasy EFL team, just to go for a little bit of bias with Chio Ogbene. Unfortunately, that didn't pay off for me. But it did for Coventry, because lots of the ball, loads of chances. If they can just tighten up a bit at the back, could be a very good season for them. But they got the win. Both sides in a similar boat. They got the win, which is the main thing. Coventry played the better. They obviously played each other about 10 days ago prior to this fixture, where Bristol City lost 1-0 at home to Coventry in the Carabao Cup. Of course, there was a bit of rotation in those sides those days, so it's very hard to judge this game based on it. But I do think Coventry are in a slightly better position at the minute. Bristol City love conceding late goals. Coventry love scoring them. So I'll probably go for a late winner in this one. And rather than a Championship's favourite scoreline, I'll go for Coventry to nick it by 2-1. And the second early kickoff is between, well, the side I expected to be the entertainers this year and the side who surprisingly have been. It is Hull City versus Millwall. Hull City make it back-to-back 1-1 draws after that comeback against Plymouth Argyle. They were under a bit of pressure late on. It wasn't a brilliant performance, but in the end, I think a draw was probably a fair result based on the quality of chances. I'd argue Plymouth were more the aggressors though, which is a surprise given how Tim Walter's side played at Hamburg. For Millwall, I don't know what to say. After winning virtually every game at the back end of last year 1-0, after questioning where the goals were going to come from, they've scored 5 goals in 2 league matches and not picked up a point against sides that were mid-table last year. It will be so disappointing for Neil Harris. 7 conceded. They fought so hard on the opening day to get back from 2 down against Watford. They fought so hard to get from 2 down against Bristol City to 3-2 up. And they still managed to throw the game away. Yes, they took pretty much all of their chances they had in that game against Bristol City. But it's still going to be a big concern defensively, because that's what Neil Harris was always priding his Millwall side on when he came back. And now they've conceded the joint most in the opening 2 games. I don't know how to go with this one. Millwall would suggest an absolute thriller. Hull would suggest a 1-1 draw. So I'm going to meet sort of in the middle. I'm going to go for a double of the Championship's favourite scoreline, 2 apiece at Hull City. And the final early kickoff, the one selected for proper TV coverage, is Queen's Park Rangers versus Plymouth Argyle. QPR, again another side that fought back valiantly at the weekend, from 2-0 down against Sheffield United and from 2-1 down with 10 men after that stupid red card for Jack Colback. But Lyndon Dykes turns up with a big moment, doesn't often score away from home, but that is a very big goal. No doubt Sheffield United had the best chances, but QPR hung in there and they found a way to get a point, which is really important. For Plymouth, as we mentioned in the last game, a really decent performance against Hull. And a bit like last season, they're going to have to get most of their points at home park. They were dismal away on the opening day when they went to Sheffield Wednesday. They looked incredibly open. They didn't deal with attacks in the wide area as well. And that's where QPR are going to have a bit of a threat. Are they going to be able to deal with those set pieces, those balls into the box? I'm not so sure. I think for Plymouth, away from home, it's going to be very hard to predict a result. I know QPR weren't great against West Brom. They weren't great for large spells against United there. I do think they're going to nick a win this time. I think it'll be relatively comfortable. Plymouth not shown much of a goal threat away from home in pre-season or the season. So I'm going to go for QPR to nick this pretty comfortably by 2-0 in the final early kickoff. Let's move on to the 3 p.m s and we start with 2 sides that I predicted in the bottom 3 pre-season, albeit both have made a hatful of good signings since. It is Blackburn Rovers versus Oxford United. Blackburn no longer with Sammy Schmodics, the Championship's top scorer from last year, but still found a way to score 2 goals, ruin my perfect score and get a point away at Norwich. And it was that man again, Ahashi. I thought he looked a real threat on the opening day when he came on. And boy, did he look a star there as well. Not many chances over the course of the game for Blackburn, but the ones they did create were good ones. Norwich created plenty against them as well, and I maintain what I said on the opening day. I know a couple of you disagreed in the comments. I think Blackburn are still pretty susceptible defensively, but even without Schmodics now, I trust them to have a threat going forward. And I think that's maybe where the difference is going to be to what I predicted pre-season. For Oxford, look, they were by far the second best team against Coventry City, but tactically they're set up well away from home, and they almost grabbed themselves a point. So again, they're stepping up and showing that away to some of the top sides, they can do a decent job. I wonder how they'll approach this game though. Will they see it as one that they can target and try and win? Or will they see it as we set up that way away from home and we just hope we can hit on the break? Against Blackburn, I think they do have a chance to do that because they're certainly a team that can be hit on the break. I think the counter-attacks will affect both teams in this one. I'm really not sure what score to go for. I think I might have to sit on the fence. I know there weren't many last weekend, but I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline. 1 apiece at Ewood Park, a result that both sides will probably like after a decent start to the season. Let's move on to another game at 3 p.m, which is Middlesbrough versus Portsmouth. Borough disappointed away at Derby. Same thing we said as against Swansea. Creating opportunities, having territory. Where is the goal threat this season? I mean, it was a proper smash and grab. Borough had enough clear-cut chances to win the game. Against Swansea, they should have scored 4 or 5. In this one, they should have scored 2 or 3. I know Tommy Conway's in now. He got 10 minutes off the bench, but I feel that's the thing that's missing from the Archer, the Akpom days. They haven't got those 30, 40 goals in the team up front. This game will be one that really got away from them. Obviously, the goal was a horrendous individual mistake, but to be fair, Caden Jackson did his job well after. But Derby created nothing. They didn't have to do anything to win the game. And for Middlesbrough, that's going to be a concern because if you can't score more than 1 goal in a match, you're always going to be susceptible. For Pompey, we've sort of seen a tale of two, haven't we? When a team has come at them like Leeds United, they've really struggled defensively, but they've had space to hit on the break. Against Luton Town, a bit of a weird match, wasn't it? Gave away loads of very good opportunities early on. But what worried me about Portsmouth was how little aggression they showed at 0-0 against 10 men. They didn't force opportunities to test the substitute goalkeeper who'd played half a game in a year and a half. They didn't take the opportunity to be on the front foot. And while they kept possession relatively well, they didn't seem to find a way to open Luton up. And in the end, almost got hit on the counter a couple of times themselves. So I was a little bit disappointed by the lack of attacking intent second half. But we have still got to bear in mind that Pompey have played Luton Town and Leeds in whatever form they are, and they're unbeaten. And Leeds and Luton will be in the top 6 this year. I've no doubt about that. And against Borough, you have to ask the same question. If they can keep it tight, if they can sit in that shape, will someone like Callum Lang be able to hit on the counter, or will it just peter out? There is a strong argument this could be a 0-0 game. I'm going to go for Borough to do what they did against Swansea. Make one of many chances count. Avoid that mistake at the back. I'm going to go for Middlesbrough by 1-0. But Pompey, not a bad start for them overall. As we move into the second half with another game at Carrow Road, it is Norwich City versus Sheffield United. The story of 2 2-2 draws at the weekend and 2 scorelines and late conceded goals from these sides that cost me a lot of points in the prediction show. Blackburn were able to get at Norwich on the counter, who again, the Achilles heel is defensive. We asked the same question about Norwich, didn't we? Why did David Wagner change his style last year from what he usually plays? Because he didn't trust that Norwich defence after the deadline day sales. And we're starting to see why, aren't they? They look so susceptible to the counter-attack. Of course, it is a new partnership at the back. Callum Doyle got himself an assist, which was nice. But with Josh Sargent getting off the mark being a positive, the defensive side was very much still the problem. On the other side of that, Sheffield United, they will be gutted. For the first game and a half of this season, they look like an absolute Rolls Royce of a team. They did the job at Preston. They were comfortable against QPR. And they had enough chances to win it comfortably. But my word, the second half, it looked like complacency. And at 2-1 up against 10 men after that Colback red card, to still concede the equaliser, the first warning sign of the season for me. Still some good performances. Some of the big guns going forward looking impressive. But that just puts a little seed of doubt, doesn't it? There was part of me prior to the second half thinking, I've got to go for a Sheffield United win here. But I actually think this is going to be a quite tight game now. I wouldn't have been shocked if it was another 2-2 draw. We saw high-scoring EFL Cup ties for both as well. But I'm going to sit on the fence a bit lower. A more cagey game this time. And the Championship's favourite scoreline again, my second one of the day, one apiece. As we move up to Deepdale, where at the time of recording on Monday afternoon, Preston North End are managerless and they will be facing Luton Town. Of course, that situation may change before we get to the weekend's action. Paul Heckingbottom, currently the odds-on favourite, I think would be a decent appointment. Preston were pretty awful at the weekend, lost 3-0 away at Swansea, a terrible second half for them, and the assistant manager then leaves the club as well. Let's be honest, it's nothing new for Preston. They created very little, they didn't show much attacking intent, and they were just hoping to hold on in a game, which is sort of the way they've been for about a year now. They just need a bit of fresh impetus. They need a new styling, and it's now 7 league games over the 2 seasons without a goal. They desperately need someone who can change that. For Luton, it was a very weird day, wasn't it, at Fratton Park? A really good start, should have been 2 or 3 up with glorious chances missed. But then a moment of absolute stupidity from Kaminski. Whatever you think of the first yellow, once you're on it, to go flying into that many tackles. And even if he got away with the first one, then the second tackle as well. What on earth he's doing, I don't know. James Shea, thankfully, ever dependable, came in, did the job, was solid when called upon. And actually didn't really seem under much pressure from Portsmouth. Had a couple of great chances themselves on the counter late on. And in the end, certainly earned their draw. And you could see the fans thought that was a good result. It was great to see a senior defence back with Amari Bell. Obviously in midfield, Jordan Clark back. It was a full senior 11 there. And I think that's going to make the difference. Of course, Preston could bring in a new manager by the weekend, bring in a couple of new signings, and it all completely flips with a new manager bounce. But as it stands at the moment, I'm going to go for a Luton away win. I just think they'll have a bit much for Preston. 2-0 for Luton Town, but a new manager, and that may change. As we move on to one of the biggest disappointments of last weekend, as that is Stoke City hosting West Bromwich Albion. West Brom continued their unbeaten league start with a 0-0 draw against Leeds United. As we mentioned, wasn't the best game of football going forward. I think both sides managed one decent chance apiece, one shot on target apiece. It was the sort of game we expected. Low scoring, cagey. On the flip side of that, Stoke City were just awful in the second half against Watford. They completely collapsed after conceding the first, and Stoke did have a couple of good chances in that game. But after that, they allowed Watford to have so much pressure, so many chances. You've got to bear in mind as well, this is a Watford side that beat Millwall but didn't create an awful lot, whereas Stoke made them look like they were going to score every time they came forward second half, offered so much territory, so many chances. It was a really poor defensive display from Stoke, and yet again, after a positive opening day, you're just left wondering, is it going to be the same old story? They'd gone so many without conceding in a row before that as well, and defensively, just completely fell apart. Makes them unpredictable, just like Bristol City. For this game, no, I find it quite difficult because West Brom don't often dominate games. I don't think we're going to see something similar. Stoke were decent at home to Coventry. They were able to restrict teams, and they had largely kept clean sheets prior to that at the end of last season and the start of this. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline for the third and the final time today. Stoke City 1, West Bromwich Albion 1. Result again, I think both would take. Well, I don't like to pay attention to the table this early in the season, but I'm sure these two sides will, because the top two go head to head. Two of the only 3 sides with a perfect record. It is Sunderland versus Burnley at the Stadium of Light. Burnley won 5-0 against Cardiff, despite starting quite slowly, which seems a bit weird to say. But obviously a gift of an own goal in the first 10 minutes. Another gift for the second as well. It was a really poor defensive display from Cardiff, which allowed Burnley to take advantage. Burnley won 5-0 with 4 shots on target and an expected goals of less than 1. I think that sums up the game. It was actually a pretty average performance from Burnley. And I know a few fans will get on my back, but it wasn't one of Burnley's best displays. It was just comfortable. A great goal from Amdouni to make it 4 was a lovely highlight moment. Goodmanson, a long-term servant, getting one as well. But certainly Burnley will play better than that and not pick up points this season, in my opinion. On the flip side, Sunderland in the first half against Sheffield Wednesday. A very good performance in terms of pressing, getting the fans on side. But again, very much affected by getting gifts, weren't they? The lack of defending for Sheffield Wednesday from set pieces was a big comfort for Sunderland, contributed to 2 of the goals. Some really good attacking performances though, and the way they pressed and defended from the front is something we haven't seen at Sunderland probably since Tony Mowbray left, which I think is really important to see. They did create chances, they did deserve to win the game. It's been a really strong start for Regis Debris. If they can just add an actual goal scorer into that mix just to compete up front, think they might have a pretty decent year. So both sides won 2 convincing fixtures in the first 2 days. What do we go for here? Well, do you know what? I'm going to have to stick with the visitors on this one. I still feel Sunderland will be a threat in this game. If Burnley are too aggressive, I could see them hitting on the counter. But based on the way that Burnley set up against Luton, I think they're going to try and restrict space from Sunderland. We saw against Luton they were more willing to go direct this season, Burnley. They weren't playing the way they did under Vincent Kompany at all times. And that will allow them to get beyond the Sunderland defence and create chances. I'm going to go for Burnley to win by 3-1. I just feel the way they've adapted this season, they will create chances on the counter. So 3-1 Burnley for me. And the final game on Saturday is the other side with a perfect start. It is Watford versus Derby County. In all seriousness, Stoke did collapse in the second half of that game, but Watford took advantage. And in terms of an attacking display, constantly creating chances, that's probably one of the best halves I can think of from Watford for a long time. They looked a constant threat against another championship team and have created chances galore. Yes, they gave up a couple in the first half, and if they'd let them in, might have been a different story. But they've shown different ways to win in the opening weeks of the season. They've battered Stoke and MK Dons. And against Millwall, they got pegged back from 2 up. And they still managed to nick a win with some bizarre goals. So it's all looking pretty good early doors for Tom Cleverley. I won't say I'm entirely convinced yet. But I still think they're a positive sign. Certainly more so than in recent seasons. For Derby, a really good smash and grab win against Borough. They were battered for the most part. But they took advantage of one chance that was gifted to them. They defended well, and against Blackburn, they showed signs of promise going forward. I'd actually argue their performance against Blackburn was better than the one against Middlesbrough going forward, but defensively, they were gritty. On another day against a side with a more ruthless clinical edge, they would have conceded a couple, but they've got that win. It's an important result for them, and I think this game, based on what we've seen so far, could be a bit of a thriller. Derby looked a real threat on the break against Blackburn. Watford have shown a lot of attacking intent this season. I'm going to go for a thrilling draw here. I'm not quite sure other than a hunch. I was going to go for Watford to maybe nick it. So I wouldn't be shocked if they win, say, 2-1. But I'm going to go for a 2-all draw. Let's go for goals and entertainment because I've gone a bit low on the goals front this year. And it's cost me in both prediction weeks so far. So a 2-all draw to finish Saturday. And that leaves us with one more game on Sunday. But certainly not a small one to finish, is it? It is Swansea City versus Cardiff City, the Welsh derby. Let's go and have a look at how they got on because it was a very different weekend for the two of them last week. Cardiff weren't terrible in the first half against Cardiff, but gave some of the worst gifts you'll ever see. Ethan Horvath, a generally very dependable keeper when we got promoted with him in goal at Luton, but he had an absolute nightmare at Burnley, didn't he? Gave an own goal for the first. Probably should have done better with a second as well. Just not a great day for him in truth. It's been a poor start from Cardiff, who were pretty poor against Sunderland as well. But a similar pattern, wasn't it? Started okay, conceded a goal, and then just completely fell apart. The confidence shredded. I wonder if Cardiff are going to do this year what I thought last season and be in a relegation mix. Looks worrying for Errol Balut so far. No goals scored, 7 conceded. They need a reaction in this one. Swansea generally, though, have had the better record in the derby in recent years. They also played very well last weekend against a pretty hapless Preston side. A 3-0 victory, a dominating performance, and much more what we're used to seeing from Luke Williams. They just need a stability and a solid year here, and I think they're going to get it. I'm going to go for Swansea to win the derby based on both of their performances so far this year, based on the fact that Swansea have generally had the better record in recent seasons in this fixture, and based on what we've seen defensively from Cardiff. I'm going to go pretty comfortable too. Swansea City to win by 2-0. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in match week 3. We start on Friday night with 3 goals for Leeds United away from home to get their first win at Sheffield Wednesday. In terms of the other fixtures, I've gone for a first win for Luton, of course, Swansea to win the South Wales derby, and a couple of thrilling 2-all draws, Hull City versus Millwall and Watford versus Derby County. Those are just my predictions for match week 3 though, a few bold ones in there, but do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comment section below and give me your predictions for match week 3. As always, if you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap. That will be in a week's time when we look ahead to match week 4. But for now, if you did enjoy this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with everything on the podcast. And finally, don't forget to join us on Friday. We'll be here watching Sheffield Wednesday v Leeds, chatting football, So make sure you come and join along. It was great fun on the opening night of the season, and hopefully it will be this time too. For now though, thank you very much for watching, for being here as always, and I'll see you again next time.